Hey friends, how are we doing? And welcome to a live stream from a sunny Sunday afternoon in Ibiza. If you've just joined in the live stream, maybe let us know in the chat that you're here. And also if you could give me a little thumbs up or any indication if the audio is fine. Can you hear my voice okay? And then I'm literally going to jump in and let's get started. What am I doing today? I'm taking a bit of a behind the scenes look at how I make music with Ableton Live and wanting to share that with you folks. If you've got any questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them and go over anything you'd like to know about something I'm doing, a question related to what's going on with the music. What else? Today is going to be mainly suitable for those of you using Ableton Live Suite. I'm working in 11, I'm working in Suite 11. I'll try and keep it today totally to Ableton Live devices and Max for Live devices, so we won't involve any third party. And what else are we going to be doing? We're going to also, if I use any samples, I will make sure that I use those again from the packs and content that comes bundled with Ableton Live 11. So I'll also be doing a little bit of traditional ways to make music and a little bit of generative ways to make music and exploring that. If you're a complete beginner, hopefully there will be some things you can take away from today's session, but it is going to be fairly sound designy, fairly advanced, basically showing you, as I said, behind the scenes, the way I go about making my music in Ableton Live. So without further ado, let's dive in. I'm going to change over my screen view. So ciao from here for now and jump into my Ableton Live view. I'm also going to take out the webcam from this view as I don't feel we need to be looking at my face all the time. Again, if you are joining the stream, do let me know in the chat. And please do let me know if there are any issues with the audio, volume level wise, quality, etc. Okay, perfect. So let's dive into Ableton Live. Also, time-wise, I'm planning to do this video for around about an hour to an hour and a half. So we'll see how we go. This is completely off the cuff. So what am I going to do to start with? Well, I'm going to pick a bit of a tempo up here. And I think today I feel like sunny afternoon in Ibiza. Yeah, let's go for 124 BPM, one of my favorite tempos up there. And I'm thinking, by the way, again, this is improvised off the cuff. I'm thinking to do something that will be a little bit club orientated. That's kind of the thoughts that I had in my head. I didn't have too many sort of restrictions, but something perhaps for a DJ set, for the dance floor, for a club. As I said, we're going to kick off at 124 BPM. And I'm thinking to begin with, I am going to sort of start with something quite traditional, and that is to sort of go for the drum groove. And let's lay in a bit of a groove, get a bit of a vibe happening, a bit of a feeling of what's going on, and then I'll sort of slowly build that up. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite instruments in Ableton Live. So over in the browser under Instruments, we have this, I think since around 11, this collection of drum synths, which you find in the instruments here. And essentially, I'm going to start off with the DS kick. It's the drum synth from this collection, and it's the one that produces kick drums. So I'm just going to drag one of those over and drop it onto a MIDI track. Also, I don't plan to speak all the time, and I'll also try and slow down and not work as fast perhaps as I do on my own and try and explain, but this isn't exactly a tutorial. It's just a behind the scenes look at me going about making music. All right, so I've got this little DS kick over here now on this MIDI track, and I'm just going to plug in a bit of a typical 4-on-the-4 kick pattern, right, in our MIDI clip down here, and I'm going to give myself some form of a ghost note. Maybe some of you are familiar with what they are. I'm going to pop in an extra kick here, but I'm going to straight away go down into the velocity lane and pull it right down till it's kind of quite a low velocity value. So let's have a little listen to that. Great, I'm going to duplicate that clip, make it longer. Let's have kind of 4 bars of kick drums. And I'm going to take one of these ghost notes here that I've created, and I'm going to shift it to another position. So we kind of have a little bit of a variation over here in bar 3 to 4. Cool. The other thing I might do here is look at, just in this kick pattern, another feature that I think is underused in Ableton Live, and that is the chance lane, right? So again, I think since around 11, we've had this ability down here in all of our MIDI clips to turn on below the velocity a lane that's all about chance. This is the chance of how often any of these notes inside of this MIDI clip are going to happen. When are they going to trigger? How often are they going to trigger? So by default, all the notes currently in the piano roll, all of these kicks, they're going to happen 100% of the time. But as you can see down here, we could adjust the percentage of how often that kick drum is going to happen. This is really lovely, and it's really, in a way, means that we don't have any excuses for kind of making our little variations that go on inside of clips either very, very random, that they don't happen very often at all, or a little bit more controlled. I'm going to go for a bit more controlled, and I'm going to add like a few more kicks at the very end of this kind of section here of this 4 bars. And on these 2 here, I'm going to make their velocities a little bit different, and I'm going to make their chants, both of them, I think actually, I'm going to grab them both together and say, bring them down till the chance of that happening is kind of around 38%, somewhere there. So I have favorite values. I find the 30s are quite nice, 56, 38, 0, 100%, 70s. Obviously, the higher the value, the more frequency it's going to happen each time the loop cycles round, and the lower the value, the less frequent it's going to happen. So now we can listen to our kick with a little bit of both ghost notes and this little fill that may or may not happen this time around. So I think we got one of them. The other thing we can do is make them different, right? So perhaps we want this one to happen a little bit more frequently and the other one not. Anyway, that's enough about the sort of beat programming for the moment. The next thing I'm going to do is actually go back to the DS kick. And by dropping it in, when I drop it in by default, it actually is in the pitch of F0. And I'd actually kind of like to change that pitch to one of my favorite kick drum frequencies, which is G0. So I'm literally just going to drag up below the note name the pitch here until I see G0 pop up there at around 48 hertz. And now I've got a G0 kick. And I'm going to just also adjust its volume envelope a little bit, make it a bit tighter, so it's a bit more punchy and a bit shorter. And by the way, within these 2 parameters and the frequency, there are many, many kick drum sounds, right? That's why I actually love this kick drum device, this little drum synth, because it actually produces really, really good kicks, and it's very clean. So we now have this lovely clean kick drum that we can obviously go ahead and kind of process it with effects and things to make it sound different. Okay, next up, I'm going to go and grab something to go with this. Let's say maybe I'm going to start with something a little bit generative. So I'm going to grab just a few favorite kind of MIDI devices and build up a little bit of a rack here. So let's go to MIDI effects in the browser. I'm going to grab velocity and drop it down here. And I'm also going to have an expression control, same folder, the MIDI effects folder. And then after this, I'm going to probably have a simpler, so we can actually drag that in if we like. Pop a simpler there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find myself a bit of a drum loop that's already a sample and already a loop, and we're going to use it in a bit of a different way. We're going to change actually how this drum loop is going to be sequenced. We're going to resequence it, let's say. I'm also going to, by the way, have the MIDI effect, the pitch. We're going to drop that in between the simpler expression control and the velocity. Again, if you're in the chat or you're watching this live stream, do reach out and let me know, and please let me know if the volumes are okay, if everything's working. If there are any issues, it'd be great to hear from you. Please let me know. I'm just going to check my data here to see if everything's okay. All right. Well, I haven't heard from anyone. As I said, fingers crossed everything's working fine and the live stream's running good. So what's next? Well, I'm going to, as I said, try and keep this all so whoever's watching this can kind of, and you have Ableton 11 Suite, you will be able to follow along with the devices, and also even if we use samples and sounds, you'll also be able to grab those as well. So I'm going to go into packs. I'm going to let that load up. And I'm going to choose a pack from here. It's already highlighted there, called the Glitch and Wash. And what I'm looking for, just these, by the way, are all of the packs that come with Ableton Live Suite. I don't know that I've downloaded all of them. There's a lot of gigabytes of instruments, presets, effect racks, but yeah, I do have quite a lot of them. And yes, watch out for that one. As I said, if you get a bit carried away and download them all, you can, by the way, put them on an external hard drive, which does make life a little bit easier in terms of storage. Anyway, I'm going to go into Glitch and Wash, and I'm going to grab myself something from this sample folder that's inside of there. And let's say we look at loops. Let's say drum loops, percussion loops. Okay, this one sounds kind of cool to start off with, so I'm just going to drag that over and drop it into my simpler over here. And what I'm going to do next, what this rack is going to allow me to do, is it's going to allow me to sort of like work with the simpler a bit, and as I said, kind of resample how this loop is being played, right? So first of all, I'm going to turn on the slice mode down the bottom here, and we're going to slice this loop up into individual little slices in the simpler. Now we need to give some MIDI note or MIDI notes to play back the simpler. So I'm just going to pop up to the top of the track, drop in a clip. I'm just going to turn on my pencil tool, and I'm going to draw myself a line of middle C's here, right? So I'm going to have notes that are going to trigger those different samples. But if we look now, if I push play on that clip, I'm just sitting on one of the slices inside of this, the simpler, right? That drum groove. And the reason for that is that currently my notes that are playing that back are only on one pitch. If I was to take other pitches like this and draw them in, I would be able to access other slices down here in the simpler, right? So if we kind of take this away and I do this, I draw in a very random sequence, but choosing different pitches. If we now push play, we can see we're now jumping around through some of the different slices, which is pretty cool. But we put all these tools in front of that, and we're going to collaborate with these tools and sort of come up with something that's a bit unique. So instead of doing this randomly, so I'm going to come back, draw all the way through there with my pencil and take these guys away. Again, if you're just joining into the stream, thanks for joining. It's a Sunday Arvo in Ibiza, an afternoon here. It's sunny outside. I hope you're great wherever you are and doing well. And hopefully, whether you're a beginner or a seasoned professional, you'll find what I'm going through here kind of interesting. And as I said, the caveats are we're working in Ableton Live Suite, but we're trying to keep it all kind of so that you can easily follow along yourself if you fancy trying out some of these techniques. All right, again, I haven't heard from anyone in the chat. If you have joined in on the live stream and you can give us a thumbs up or a hello there, that would be awesome. Also, if you can, I think I've just seen someone pop up here. Daniel, how are you doing, Daniel? Thanks for joining in on the live stream. If you could let me know, Daniel, how things are sounding, how's my voice, and how is the audio of the music, I'd much appreciate that. That would be fantastic. All right, so let's crack on here with this little rack I've built, and I'll expand on what I'm doing here. So I'm going to hit play. We know we're just hitting this one slice here, So let's actually well, instead of listening to that, let's kind of set up what we need to do over here. What we kind of want to do, what these three devices are going to do here is, first of all, the MIDI effect velocity is going to randomize the velocity of these notes that are coming in. So these notes that are in the MIDI clip here, they're going to get a little bit of random velocity, and I'm going to do that just simply by adding a bit of the random knob here. I'm going to keep the value quite low, and I'm just going to adjust my low and high knobs over here, which are kind of setting the range between the hardest hits and the softest hits. What could be randomized is now going to be between those two brackets, right? So we're going to have a bit of random velocity. That's great because it's going to make things sound way more expressive and more human. Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate that a lot, mate. Thank you for letting me know that. That's fantastic. All right, cracking on here. So we've got the velocity set up a little bit. Now with expression control in the middle here, and I love this device, by the way, don't sleep on it, so you can use it for many, many great things. We'll notice kind of at the very top of it, it can do a lot of things, but we can see MIDI in velocity, input, and we can map that to something, right? So what we actually want to do is map the velocity here to the pitch. And you'll see here that we've now sort of taken control of this little pitch MIDI device over here. And if I push play now, the sequence of events that are going to happen here is the random velocity of those MIDI notes is going to go through the expression control and now adjust the pitch. So as the velocity randomizes, so is the pitch, which means we should start to get different slices being triggered. And then we can kind of control how far this velocity, this pitch knob modulates, right? How far does it move between the different values? So let's push play now, and I'm just going to bring the kick down a bit in volume. So you can see it's starting to work here. It's going to move around different slices. Let's bring the max value down of the expression control a bit. Cool. And you can see, like, using just the minimum and maximum, I can really sort of say where in that loop in the simpler am I sort of working, where am I randomizing. So if I go right down here, you can see, well, I've lost the beginning of the loop, but here I'm working in the beginning. If I go this way, I'm working further in. And of course I can bring the minimum up and the maximum down and sort of stick inside of that range, right? So for me, that's already a pretty cool little sequence we've got going on there of this percussion. We're completely replaying it. Now, what else can we do? Well, with simplers, if you use the slice mode like this, you've got options here to how we're slicing it. So if we look a bit further down the bottom here, we can see we're currently slicing by the transient, by all the little peaks in that drum loop. We can change that to beat. So now the slices would be by sequence beat division. That can obviously sound quite nice. And we can also use region, which I quite like, which isn't then note synced, and it also isn't relying on the transient. And you can see here we can go all the way from 2 regions, like 2 different slices, all the way up to 64, right? So, and let's maybe dial that down a bit. It's too crazy. Or actually, I might go back to transient because I quite liked how that sounds. And also with the transient, the sensitivity knob here, again, dials back how many transient has happened, right? Which is, again, rather cool. Okay, let's drop our kick in. Nice. So with this simpler as well, there are many possibilities. I could go down a rabbit hole just with this particular technique, right? This is just the basic tip of the iceberg stuff here in terms of what I've sort of done here. What we could do, a couple of options here. We could leave it like it is in the track at the moment. Just that's like how we want it to be. But obviously, if we're concerned that we're about to lose a sort of pattern that we want to keep, because obviously right now it's going to constantly spin random. It's going to be constantly randomized. I open up the project tomorrow and it's going to be something different to what I heard today. Well, one way we can avoid that, of course, is to look at ways to either grab it in audio. So I'm just going to show you. I'm going to leave it like it is for the moment, but if I was to go to the audio track right next door and say, take the audio in from this, set it to record, turn it to in, I could now grab a recording of that. And I'm just going to set my volume to 0 on this track just so the recording goes in as loud as it could do for the moment. So I'm grabbing all of that in audio form with the view that I can come back in a moment. And the cool thing about setting it up like this, recording it into audio, is obviously I can now play around with all of the controls, and that's all being recorded, right, in audio. So we're not going to lose anything here, and we can experiment. Right, and that's all being captured. So as I said, the limits, well, as you can probably see from a sound design point of view, we can go get a lot out of this, right? So I'm going to stop that recording. But what I would do if this was the workflow I was going for is I would now turn this track back from receiving an input to a normal audio track, and I would now go through and look for, you know, my favorite loop that I've recorded here. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but there are many, many possibilities now with this audio clip that we can resample and recreate. But we've just essentially made our own audio loop here that we could choose the section of that we'd like to use, right? And we can jump around in here, find our favorite, move between the lines. Possibilities are endless, right? So as I said, if you're doing something a little bit random or generative like I'm doing here, and you want to capture what's going on, you don't want to lose it, this is a great way to do that, right? Get it down into audio, and then you can make your own loops and save it that way. So back to the kick, back to our random percussion loop that we've resequenced here. Might just pop an EQ after this percussion loop. And I'm just going to use that just to take any low end out here that we don't kind of need in the percussion. It's just meant to be sort of like a little bit of a top loop. Nice. Okay, the next thing I had in my thoughts is to grab a breakbeat of sorts, and inside of the packs again that come with Ableton Live 11, we get this kind of pack break selection by Sample Magic. So let's have a look at this, and if we open up the samples, we get a bunch of vintage breakbeats in here. So I'm just going to have a little listen through this folder and see if I can find something to go with what we have so far. Just going to bring this audio out the way so I can play scene 1. Okay, I might take that one for the moment, but I'm just going to have a look and see if there's anything also more emptier, kind of without not so busy. Okay, scrolling through there. Okay, let's try this other one. Yeah, these are all really quite full. They're cool, but they're all quite busy. All right, that's interesting as well. Let's have that over on this same audio track. Okay, all right, well, I'll kind of work with what I've got there. Again, not going to spend too much time sort of messing around. Let's keep pushing on. As I said, I plan to do this for about an hour and a half. Hope you're still with me, Daniel. Again, thanks for letting me know the sound is okay and clean. Appreciate that a lot. Again, if anyone else is here in the live stream, give us a thumbs up, a hello in the chat. How you doing? Hope you're enjoying this and having a great Sunday afternoon if you're over in this part of the world. In Europe. If you're not, then you could be morning or evening, I guess, if you're coming in from the States or Canada over that way. All right, so these breakbeat loops that I've taken, I'm just going to work with those for the moment straight up in audio. So I brought them over onto an audio track, and I'm just going to show you how, you know, this is a thing that you always are constantly thinking about when you're producing music. The discussion of whether something works better in audio or in MIDI. So before I was working with audio in a sampler, right? So it's an instrument and it's in MIDI. Here I'm just going to work with it purely in audio. So let's try the first loop. And what I'm going to do that I love doing with these kind of breaks is I head over to the envelope properties here. Let's just take the kick out. And I'm going to bring down over here in the beats mode. I'm going to say for the moment, preserve transients. I'm going to change to the arrow going forwards, and that allows me to work with this. Right, and I can really kind of gate and thin out this drum loop to be sort of as busy as I would like it to be, or really full, or kind of gate it a little bit, chop it off a little bit. I'm also going to re-pitch it slightly. Okay, let's try that. That's pretty cool. Let's do a volume balance. Okay, let's try this other loop. Maybe I'm interested in having the other loop instead, so I just want to check it out. Because I like the vocal in this one. This one's a little bit looser in its timing and could do with a little bit of warping, like going through and sort of tightening up. Some of the beats are not exactly kind of on the grid. They're either quite late or quite early, particularly this one over here, bar 4. So I think also like I'm okay with the first one, so I'm going to work with that one. I'm going to gate it off a little bit more, keep it pitched down. I'm going to try making a copy of it, and in the copy I'm going to reverse the audio, see what happens when I do that. That might be interesting later for some sort of variation. But for now, I think that's pretty cool. I'll stick an EQ on this again, just see what it looks like, also knock off any kind of, again, big amounts of low end that might be getting into my kick drum. Also check the top. Cool. Also, if you have any questions, as I said, if you're inside of this live stream and I'm doing something as I'm going along and you want to ask me something about it, I'm not glued to the chat, but I am kind of keeping an eye out on it. So feel free, there is never a silly question. Feel free to ask a question, and if I'll do my best to answer it as I go along here. All right, cool. So I've got my breakbeat thing. Maybe I'd like to kind of, I'm just going to also call this one reverse so I don't get confused. Just type in there and give it a different color as well. So, and this one here is the orange. All right, cool. And let's even name it up here. So we got breaks. This guy over here is like a perk loop of sorts. And this one's, as it says on the tin there, that's the kick drum. Cool. So at the moment we've got this. Let's try this breaks. Maybe I'll save it for later, but we also might have a beat repeat here. And just see if we can juggle this up a little bit and get some variations and stuff as we go. So let's try a bit of beat repeat action on this just to see what happens. That could be cool. Let's make it only happen every couple of bars, or even 4. Nice. So every 4 bars now we've got some sort of little fill happening in this breakbeat track that isn't in the audio track and in the programming of that beat. It's now shuffling that a bit, which is really cool. And I've made it only happen every 4 bars. Obviously you can see you can bring that right down to happening a lot. I could also bring up my variation amount a bit, and that would mean that each time it does this little beat repeat, it's not going to be exactly the same. There's going to be 2 different versions. I can also change the grid, so what value is it going to repeat? So an 8th note or a 16th. Right? That's nice because that's a lot more subtler than it was before. Just every now and then a quarter note gets a bit of a beat repeat on it. All right, let's go for a bass line. Let's get some bass happening in here. So Command-Shift-T for a new MIDI track. Let's call this one the bass. And I'm going to use operator for that. Love a bit of operator. So again, if you are watching this video and you're working with Ableton Live Intro or Standard, I did sort of point out at the beginning of the video, this is, you kind of need Live Suite to get the benefits out of this, but I am keeping today to Ableton Live instruments, devices, effects, no third-party stuff, and yeah, also using samples if I do use any from the packs that come with Ableton Live, and this kind of shows you that there's a lot of awesome content in there. All right, so bass line, I think I'm going to keep it something fairly simple. Let's have an operator down on the track here, and I think I'm just going to write in just sort of something like this just to get started. We haven't really got a key or scale at the moment because we've been working on drums. So let's maybe just have something like that. So what are we doing here? We've got the 3rd and the 7th. If we were in C or A minor, we'd be on the root, the 3rd and the 6th up there. So if we make it A minor, that would be the 5th. No, sorry, I was on the 5th. And this is indeed the 3rd. All right, so let's have that. And I'm already going to, again, use the chance on this A of happening not so often, really quite low. Same thing as before. We could also have a bit of velocity change here, but we might do that again with the velocity device as I'm programming it in. That's a real key thing, by the way, to your music production that's going to elevate your music, is constantly thinking about, like, if you're going to play it in, then you are going to generally get a human feel because of the note length differences and the velocity and stuff like that. If you're going to program it in, you need to constantly be thinking about that in ways to make your music more alive and more human, right? All right, so our notes are up too high. That's for sure fair enough. So Command A. It's a question of whether we're going to have a low bass or a high bass. Let's say we choose on oscillator a sawtooth. Bring the filter down. Bring the envelope up. There we go. All right, and let's do a little bit of work here with the pattern. This one I might also give it a bit of chance that doesn't always happen. And this is where, as you can see, using that chance feature, really, you can make a lot of ground in terms of variations and making your programming and MIDI clips really, really interesting between what you're doing here and the notes and all that kind of thing. We also could have some longer notes here, so we're working currently in all 16ths. All right, that's a pretty groovy bass line we got going there. Plenty of range on the cutoff to open it up over time. And if we wanted to sort of use, I mean, Operator's just a super powerful synth. It can do a lot of different things. Right now I'm just using it for one oscillator that is a sawtooth and the filter. But if we were to sort of play around with the oscillator B above it, we could do a bit of FM synthesis where oscillator B effectively modulates A. And that all happens also over here on the global shell. If we have this traffic light in this direction, it means that the oscillators are kind of stacked on top of each other and set up perfectly for modulating each other. Whereas if we flip it to this style of the traffic light horizontally, then now all these oscillators essentially stack together to make one sound, and it becomes like a subtractive synth. So I'm going to put it back to its default, which happens to be FM, and we can play around. So maybe we want a dirtier bass than we've got. We can also change here in the global shell while we hear the voices to just 1. So it's in mono, that's what I've done there. And now I'm going to try a bit of FM. So I'm going to bring up B, oscillator B. That just adds volume, but if I change the tuning a bit, and I might actually go back and make oscillator A a sine wave again. There we go. And make the B a saw. Right, and you can get all these lovely tones in here. So we could make the bass an FM bass, right, by going over there. If you're still with me, Daniel, give us a shout out. Everything running good. Sorry to keep kind of coming back to you, but if you're still there, give us let us know in the chat that everything's running smooth. Much appreciated for your feedback. So how are we doing here? As I said, we're planning to go for about an hour and a half. We've got a bit of a groove and a bass line here. I think it's sounding all right. So let's maybe move on to doing something next. Let's maybe look for, again, something where we might use another sort of sampler. So let's say we grab ourselves a new MIDI track. Let's throw a sampler in. And what we might do with this, let's see, I'm going to packs again. We're going to go looking for some new sounds. Let's stick to the glitch and wash, which I think I used earlier for the, what was that, the percussion loop. Let's see if we can grab something from here. Rightio. So what have we got in here? We've got some kind of cool stuff, and we've got a bit of music, I think, in here. Musical loops, let's say. So we've got some pad loops. Right, change of plans. These could make a really nice kind of like atmospheric thing in the background here. So I might keep the sampler for in a moment. But what I'm going to do with these guys is come back a bit to the same trick that I used with the breaks, right? So we're going to have the same sort of layout. So let's grab what we need. Need a pitch, velocity effect. We want an expression control in the middle of those two, and then we're going to grab from the instrument folder a simpler, put it behind there, and then we're going to go through, let's say, again, we're going to have just a simple pattern like this for starters. Perfect. Right, then we're going to bring in a bit of random velocity, low and high range, which is going to be random between those two values. We're going to map the velocity, and we are going to map that again to the pitch. We're going to try some of these samples in here. Okay. That's a bit too weird for my liking, but that's okay. Let's turn on slice. And we'll go for region. There we go. There we go. That's kind of what I had in mind. We might try out a couple of these other samples, but that isn't bad. Let's just adjust the ranges here on the expression control a bit. All right, something like that. Let's have the EQ here again, just to clean it up a little bit. Nice, a little bit tweaking around there. Change the pitch of this sample slightly here in the simpler. Sounds quite nice in its original pitch, but we can move that if we wish, adjust it. All right, what's next? Let's say we go for something a little bit melodic in here. Going to adjust my break track a little bit, still a bit full for me. Somewhere in there. Let's also actually come back to the sample for a second, and I just want to try reversing it and see what it sounds like. Also nice. So what we might do is actually group this guy, open up the chains, duplicate it. We might have one reversed and one not reversed. So this is the reverse layer. This one's the original. Bring the volume down on the reverse one. Yeah, it just kind of adds a little bit more, and we could do some few things like could pan it a little bit away from the other layer. So we've got this now wider kind of interesting thing going on. Makes a difference. Let's bring this bass down a bit more neutral. Cool. All right, so moving on, what are we going to do next? Let's sort of think about what we might add in here. Maybe we go for something like a little bit of a riff now type of thing. So let's maybe say, it doesn't really matter what we sort of start with, maybe analog or wavetable. Let's just pop on the MIDI controller. Right, somewhere in there, let's have a little look, see if there's something from the capture that works, capture MIDI. Let's do a bit of work on the synth sound now, and maybe a bit of quantizing. Mainly this note here perhaps bothers me a little bit. I'm just going to pop into my quantize settings here. And also this one, maybe later. There we go. The rest of it I think is quite cool, unquantized, so we'll keep it like a loose, organic sort of track. So I'll do a bit of work on this analog. So let's go into the global shell, let's bring the voices to one. Mono, sorry, here. Bit of vibrato, so a bit of pitch wobble. We could try glide as well. If we want to use the glide, we might try this clip duplicated, and in this clip, Command A to select all the notes, and let's make them all legato. And that will help a lot with the glide if we want to try gliding in this second clip. So I'm just going to write in there so I know what I did. This is a legato version. Let's give it another color so we know it's a bit different. Okay, time for a bit of hi-hat action, I think. A little build up the percussion a little bit more. If you're just tuning in and joining this live stream, thank you very much for joining the live stream, and I hope you're enjoying it. This is essentially a little bit of a behind the scenes look at me, how I produce using Ableton Live. I've tried to keep it today so that we're just working with Ableton instruments and effects, no third-party stuff. And also any of the samples I've used today are bundled with Ableton Live Suite, and hopefully I'm kind of showing you ways that all of those samples are fair game when you take them and you turn them into your own sample, essentially how they're being played, perhaps the processing, how they're being affected, whether they're playing in reverse, whether they're being gated, you know, all of these kind of techniques to make them a little bit more interesting. So let's crack on here. We've got a bit of an idea rolling. And yeah, I'm going to go through for about another half an hour. Again, I'm not sure where you are tuned in and listening to this, or if you're watching back on the recording after the live stream. I hope you're getting value from this and enjoying the little behind the scenes look at what I get up to. All right, so what have we got here? Just got to remind myself of the idea. Going to process this synth a little bit, get some movement in here shortly as well. So let's say we have a little bit of maybe it's busy enough without that, but we'll definitely give it a bit of reverb, I think. Also maybe try the chorus a bit, thicken it up. Okay, maybe a bit of color. Bring it down really subtle. A little bit of this goes a long way, the overdrive. And you're essentially not looking for a huge increase in volume, but this nice bit of character that we brought out there. Let's have a look at this perk loop for a second, revisit that. I'd like to pitch this up maybe a bit. So it might be time to whip out the old beat repeat again. It's just, as I said, one of these kind of effects that a lot of people kind of sleep on it, like we often do, all of us. And you don't have to use it just on beats, right? It can virtually be used on anything you like, and it's an opportunity to kind of like create little fills and notes and little variations. So we might bring that right down and in front of the overdrive and just have a little listen to it on this kind of analog riff, I would call it, sort of this little riff we've got going here at the moment. There we go. Again, we might not want it as busy as that. So we bring it back to only happen not so frequently. And we might decide which note is going to get varied. Which 16th note. Can also get pretty wild if you move the pitch decay, so when the fill happens. You get that, which is really rather cool, and you can dial it back in to a subtler value. And now if we have a bit of variation, it's not going to happen so often, it's going to happen every now and then. Sorry, it's going to happen 4 times. Each time it's going to be different within that 4. So yeah, so it can get pretty wild. I'm going to leave it off for a moment, but it just shows you the potential for what you can do with that. It's a very cool little device, and as I said, it's by no means needing to be only applied to beats, right? So what have we got again at the moment? Just reminding myself here. Just going to color these up with my normal colors so I can kind of find my way around my session a bit, do a bit of housekeeping. Might also revisit in a second the kick drum a little bit and make that a little bit smoother. What are we going to call this one? We're going to call it the Atmo. Like so. And nothing on that track at the moment. We can get rid of that. Try the legato clip. Yeah, so that Atmo, definitely like it, but it's going to be right in the background, right? It's not going to be a foreground type thing. It's going to be bubbling away in the background. So let's do another MIDI track, and let's build up a bit more percussion. And we're going to use one of these very tasty, again, drum synths from Ableton, the DS. And this time we're going to choose the hi-hat from here. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of like options. So let's have the DS HH. And let's say we're going to program in a bit of a hi-hat loop, like so, and we might have, again, a bit of a ghost note here or there. Let's see. Okay, can add some more variations in the future, but that gets us a bit of a loop going. And now let's adjust our sound a little bit. And the pitch. I might keep it quite subtle here, But what I want to do is, again, I need more sort of vibe in here. So definitely going to have a little bit of velocity variations so that we've got a bit of a pattern that feels more interesting. Okay, something like that. Now let's give this a little bit of processing. But before we actually process it, a really cool thing to try out here would be, again, just trying to get it a little bit more humanized. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to get an LFO here and just pop it behind the hi-hat drum synth. And I'm going to map this to the decay, and I'm going to settle it down from being that wild. So we can do that a lot of ways. We can bring down the depth and kind of say we'll only focus on the decay between here and here, and the rate obviously speeds up how fast that modulation happens. We can note sync that if we wish, so it happens every quarter note, so it will be much more rhythmically, or we can leave it free in frequency, so it's free rate. Let's have a listen to that just in isolation. And instead of the sine wave, I'm going to choose the random waveform. That's a lot more random. And let's offset a little bit again. So if I bring it over to the left here, you can see, and put the depth right back up, those two kind of work together. So if I put the depth in the middle and I bring the offset over, you can see that my range of, it's going to go from very short decay to a little bit longer. So let's kind of get it so I can set where I want the furthest that it opens up to. Yeah, probably something like that, maybe a little less even. And now I can bring my depth up a little bit. And the other way you can do this as well is up the top here a little bit with the range, right? So if I kind of reset all of this to the default, you can kind of also say, okay, you know, don't go any higher than that point on the decay, and don't go any lower than this point, right? And you can kind of, again, dial that range in. So that's a bit too short when it goes right down to that tiny decay. Yeah, somewhere maybe about 20 there. So the range might be quite small. That's pretty cool. Getting there. I'll bring the depth down a bit now. Okay. Still needs a little bit of work on how small the range is. Yeah, that's better. It's much more subtle now, this range of variation between the decays, but it now sounds a lot more humanized. I'm going to do that also with the bass. I forgot earlier that when I programmed in my bass notes, I didn't attend to the velocity. So again, as I have programmed that one rather than playing it, I'm going to grab the MIDI effect, velocity MIDI effect, and pop it in front of the instrument. We're going to just have those notes coming into the operator a little bit randomized, so we've got some form of humanization of those bass notes, which we currently don't have. So again, setting my parameters, what is the range that I'm randomizing, the softest it could be, and the hardest it could be in that range. And if I want this bass a little less donkey, I can take away the FM synthesis oscillator B, return the A to a sawtooth. Go back to that kind of vibe there. Okay, let's go back to this hi-hat and let's process it a little bit. Let's grab erosion from the drive and color folder for the hi-hats. Put it after the hi-hats. And let's add a bit of color. right? So you got this really metallic kind of very, clean metal sound. Love erosion for adding a bit of nice kind of crunch to that hi-hat. You can choose to have it really wide and sort of widen the stereo of the hi-hat. You can also add a sine wave, which will add like another sine sound on top. Probably in this case I'll go for the noise, and we can decide where we want that noise to be concentrated. I think where it was is pretty good, and how wide or narrow that amount of processing is, right? Okay, might just do another MIDI clip for the hi-hats. So that could be a variation of sorts later on. All right, so we're cracking on here. Getting towards the last kind of 15 minutes or so of the live stream. If you have been in the live stream and you're watching this, feel free to let me know in the chat. Give us a thumbs up, hello, how you doing, where you're listening to it from. Daniel, it's been great to have you there from Switzerland. I hope you're enjoying this session and you're taking something away from it. As I said, it's not really a tutorial, it's a bit of a behind the scenes of how I produce using Ableton Live. I do want to increase or find a frequency where I will do this more often. I need to figure that bit out, but if anyone's got any feedback about weekends and times or things like that works well, it'd be interesting to hear those kind of thoughts. If you do get value out of this video, please give it a like or a thumbs up, and consider subscribing and dinging the bell to keep in touch with future videos. And as I said, we'll figure out a regular frequency where we can do these sessions more often. This was my first time kind of figuring it all out and how it might work. So up for some feedback if you wish to give any. So yes, please like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the session. So let's get back and see where we can kind of take this to. At the end here, we've got a bit of a vibe going on. I'll try another one with the hi-hats a bit here. Let's maybe do a bit of a drum rack. And in the drum rack, an empty one, we're just going to grab an empty drum rack, and I'm going to grab a bunch of shaker samples if I can find some. So again, I'm just going to filter my sample library to the packs that come with Ableton Live 11 Suite. So this will be available to others who have the packs. So let's say, what have we got in samples by, no, they're going to be loops. We could use those, but we'd be better off with some one-shots for me. That's what I'm kind of looking for. So here's some one-shots, drums, shaker. All right, cool. Let's have all of those. Drag those down into the drum rack here, and let's see what else we've got. Maybe fill it up with a few more. And our friends at Chop and Swing, see what they've got. Cool, we'll have those as well. Again, a little bit of an organic kind of drum element happening in here, so let's try that. And in this case, I'm literally just going to write a pattern. Again, let's just say we're on the offbeats. Although, yeah, this is where I might make a choice here. I think on the hi-hats, what I might do, get rid of that pattern and make this more just the offbeat hi-hats type pattern. And on this one, I think I'll have a 16th type pattern, all 16ths. something like that. And what we're going to do, try and find some other shakers in here. That one's pretty cool. So let's just limit ourselves down to not all these sounds at the same time. See how these two fit together. So the hi-hat and now the shaker. And what I want to do is take some of these shakers and move them somewhere else, right? And see about layering this a bit. Let's go up. That's pretty cool already. And let's maybe make that the loop. Hang on a sec, I'll get rid of these guys. We'll work on these a little bit more in the future in terms of each sample, etc. Actually, I'm not sure why, but I kind of like, yeah, that will work also. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Right, we do this second loop a little bit different then. Better, I think. Cool. Just popped in to look at the chat for a second. I can see Degstep. Hi, we can only hear the sound of the microphone. No, my bads. I'm not sure about that. I hope not. Is that right? I heard before that everything was working okay. If you can't hear the output, do let me know. Yeah. Not sure what's happening there. Thank you for commenting. I'm going to jump back in here. Let me know if you definitely can't hear the outputs, but I think we are running fine there. I'm just going to check on YouTube as well as our friend OBS. Let's just have a look there. Yeah, it definitely looks like it's outputting fine. So do let me know, Degstep, if that's the case that we still cannot hear it. Or you cannot hear it, should I say. Cool, man. Thank you very much for letting me know that. Nice. All right, so we've got this kind of idea rolling. Let's have a little step back in a moment and see what we've got. Maybe we can make this MIDI here of the riff that we played in. Let's do a duplicate of that. And let's have one of these up an octave, see what it sounds like. So here's the original recording I played on my MIDI controller. Let's have that up. Could be nice to change up to that at some point. Okay, let's do a bit of labeling here so we don't get confused, or Keith doesn't get confused. That's the shaker. Shake, shake, shake. All right, we've got this riff happening, we've got this Atmo. Didn't use the sampler yet. We might get a bit of a vocal thing happening. Didn't use that, or we were recording into that earlier on in the piece. So we just do a little bit of housekeeping so we don't get too lost here. Anything anyone would like to see that's in the live chat, or do you have any questions for me while we're still here? I'm going to wrap it up in about sort of 5 minutes. Do let me know. All right, so let's see what else we can find tucked away in these pack libraries from Ableton as a sort of finishing note for today. Let's see what we've got in here. I feel like there might be a little bit of a vocal or something we can play around with, considering we've sort of been messing a bit with these techniques of using the slice mode in the simpler. Okay, so what happens with this? I might try something interesting with this vocal. We could turn on the slice mode. That's pretty dope. Okay, let's head to the simpler. Let's have a little pause there. Degstep, you're welcome, man. Thanks to you. Where are you tuned in from, by the way? Let me know in the chat there, and thank you for commenting there. Glad you're enjoying. All right, let's crack on here. Give a little bit of EQ on this vocal. Just to clean up the low end here. Let's try out now how we're slicing it a little bit. I don't know why, but I'm really drawn to what happened with that. That could also work though, quite nicely with the, instead of by transients by region, quite like that as well. So let's pop some processing on this. Oh, sorry, wrong. That could be interesting, but it wasn't quite what I had in mind. Let's get a reverb for sure. Before that, maybe a bit of chorus after the EQ. Okay, so the Atmo is going to need a little bit of work now that this vocal's come in, but I'm pretty happy with this vocal. I think it kind of adds something really, really interesting to the track here. So again, I'm just going to give this a MIDI effect in front of the vocal to give it velocity, a bit of randomization. Okay, let's do another one of these without the pitched up note. So just duplicate that clip down. And just pop that back down to the same as there. Right, folks, well, that's where we got in an hour and a half. Again, if you've been tuned in and listening and being part of the live stream, I thank you very much for joining me today on this Sunday afternoon in Ibiza. It's been fun. The idea behind this was to have a behind the scenes look at how I produce. using Ableton Live. Everything was kind of focused on Suite today, so if you have the Live Lite or Live Standard, unfortunately some of these things won't apply to you, but maybe it encourages you also to upgrade to the Live Suite, as you get all these fantastic instruments and effects built in, and you can see what you can create just using Ableton Live devices, and also taking things from these Ableton Live packs that come bundled with the software. This is not something that's cost me extra. It's all bundled with the Ableton Live 11 Suite, soon to be 12. So again, thanks for tuning in and joining this first live stream. I do hope to figure out a more regular frequency of them. If you've got any suggestions, let me know, but I'm thinking on the weekend for an hour and a half to do some more of these kind of sessions. If there's a lot of beginners, let me know, and perhaps I'll do one that's more focused on beginner type things, but today was a bit indulgent and looking at it from the perspective of how I go about it. It's been very unscripted, raw, probably rough around the edges, but I hope you've learned something today and can take something away from this. So I'm going to call this a wrap. If you did get value from this video, of course, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will just transition over for 1 second to our friend OBS and show my face and say again a very big thank you to you all, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks a lot for tuning in today and joining me. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Ciao for now.